Hey everyone, this is Chris Barnes from East Brunswick Public Library. You're listening to the EBPL Podcast Network, and this is another episode of Read, Watch, Listen, where we talk about what we've been reading, watching, and listening with people in the community. Today I have a special guest you might have seen around the library. She's a library associate here at East Brunswick Public Library. Becca, Levin, thank you for being on the show today.
Hey, Chris, thanks so much for having me.
No problem. So what exactly does a library associate do?
So I work in the Teen Services Department, and I am the one in charge of all of the teen volunteering. So all of the tag applications, I'm the one processing them. All of the monthly signups for volunteer hours, I'm the one collecting all of those and sending out the sign-up sheets and running the tag meetings along with my counterpart, Sarah, who takes care of most of the programming.
So you do a lot of the behind-the-scenes work to keep our teen programming afloat, is what you're trying to say.
Pretty much. You know, I don't want to say that I'm like the captain of the vessel, but maybe like the first mate, the navigator, something up there.
Our producer, Melissa, here was talking about Star Trek before. So what I would like to say is you're kind of like the Mr. Scotty to the teen department's Enterprise.
I will definitely take that comparison.
All right. Excellent. So let's get into it. Becca, what have you been reading lately?
So I read 2 books yesterday alone, so we have lots that we can talk about.
Hooray!
But probably one of the coolest things that I read recently was the first 2 books of, it will be a trilogy when it's finished, but it's the first 2 books of the Binding Light series by Freya Marske. I think I'm saying her name right. But the first book is called A Marvellous Light, and it's basically like an Edwardian version of urban fantasy, which is pretty cool.
So is it like a straight up fantasy, or is it just with more wizards and magic-y stuff, or is it just more flat out, here's a bunch of knights and knight-esque people doing knighty things to each other?
A little bit of both, I'd say. The general storyline is that this minor lord who has like a secretarial position in Parliament gets transferred to a new department, and it turns out that he is now the liaison to the entire magical community of England. And there's, of course, a big conspiracy happening and some very bad people trying to do very bad things, and he gets dragged into all of it and ends up having some really interesting new perspectives that help the good guys kind of save the day, so to speak.
That sounds good. What else have you been reading?
I just finished the entire Fruits Basket manga for the first time. I was watching the show for a while, but kind of fell off around the last season. But since we just got the entire series in and it's on our new bookshelf, I decided that I might as well work my way through it while I'm here. Okay,
my follow-up question on that is, now you're talking to someone whose anime manga kind of ends with Lupin the Third and Macross. So what exactly is Fruits Basket about?
So it's this cute little kind of slice of life, kind of shoujo girly fantasy where this young high school student is essentially homeless for a brief period and is sort of low-key adopted by this very aloof, rich family from school. And it turns out that the main members of the family are victims of this magical curse that if they are hugged by a member of the opposite sex, they turn into an animal of the Chinese zodiac. And it's her kind of life living with them and becoming friends with them, and then eventually deciding that she needs to break the curse so that they can all have normal lives.
Okay, that sounds interesting. And I would also have loved to have been a fly on the wall when someone was pitching that to a studio.
I know. It's like, how do you come up with this stuff?
Now, I have a question for you since you work in our teen department. So one of the ongoing literary debates, it's not even a debate in a negative way, is that people feel bad as adults wanting to read YA or teen fiction. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, so I am squarely in adult territory, but I love young adult fiction because for a few different reasons. Because first of all, it tends to be pretty light and easy to read. So it's a good palate cleanser in between, like if you're reading a lot of heavy nonfiction or like a really intense murder mystery. A lot of YA can be very cozy and comfortable and easy to read. So it's good for that kind of palate cleansing in between heavier stuff. But also because a lot of YA is really changing from the YA that like I grew up with. Like if you look at like the late 90s, 2000s YA And a lot of what's coming out now, we're seeing so much more, not only diversity in the characters, in the authors especially. We're seeing a lot more own voices, which is authors of color writing characters of color, authors with disabilities writing characters with disabilities. So it's become a much wider range of voices that we're hearing from, and a lot more people who are reading can see themselves represented in these books now.
Which is good for everyone. All right, I'm going to segue into the next part of the show. What have you been watching lately?
I have been really enjoying revisiting a lot of fun 80s films that I'm a big fan of.
You would get along with my 4-year-old daughter. Continue.
Perfect. Well, we're going to schedule a play date. We'll have a sleepover. Let me know when's good. But I rewatched Tron recently because I got to show my partner Tron Legacy, which was like a much more recent sequel. War Games is another big favorite of mine.
War Games is amazing, and it still holds up because it's just so nuts that they even made this in the first place.
Oh, it's so good. My dad actually has a little, like, I don't even know what to call it. It's not like a tapestry, but it's like a little like picture frame with like a code board behind it that he like worked on himself. And it's actually the like Whopper cycling through the nuclear codes graphic, and it resets like every 30 minutes or something. It's great.
That's amazing. So what else have you been watching?
I also recently finished the first season of Our Flag Means Death, which is a really cool, like kind of tongue-in-cheek historical pirate show from HBO. It's basically a sort of satirical, fantastical look at the lives of Stede Bonnet and Blackbeard, some of the more famous pirates of that era, and some very ridiculous hijinks ensue.
Okay, anything else in the watching department?
I'm also watching Breaking Bad for the first time.
Really? I think I'm the only person in the world who couldn't get through it.
You know, I tried it a couple of years ago. I watched like the first 2 or 3 episodes and I couldn't get into it and I gave up on it. But my partner wanted to do a rewatch recently and said, you gotta watch it. And so I was bribed with popcorn and ice cream and it worked.
So maybe it's more about the ice cream and the popcorn.
That may be true. You know, the importance of movie and TV watching snacks cannot be understated.
I totally feel you on that one. And the last part of Read, Watch, Listen is the listening. So what have you been listening to? This could be anything. It could be music. It could be a podcast.
So I recently caught up on one of my favorite podcasts. I was a little bit late to the game, so I had a lot of old episodes to listen to, which was great. I really enjoyed it. It's called Catie and Erik's Infinite Quest. There's some fun subtitle to it. It's like an ADHD adventure or whatever, but it's these 2 best friends and partners named Catie and Erik who got really big on TikTok a couple of years ago, like during the pandemic, doing short form mental health content, specifically around like ADHD and neurodivergency. And each episode kind of focuses on a different aspect of having neurodivergence, how you can build good routines and habits in your life. I particularly like the episodes that are just very real and honest, where they like admit that they're having a bad day, talk about why that's happening, you know, maybe talk about some possible plans that they have for helping to kind of reinvigorate the day and take it back. They're also really, really funny. So I always laugh like at least 3 times per episode, which is definitely a big plus for me.
Sounds good. Is there anything else in the listening category?
Yeah. So summer, for whatever reason, has always lived in my brain as like classic rock season. So I've been really enjoying just like the Spotify classic rock mix is really fun.
So who's a forgotten 70s, 80s classic rocker that you think deserves more love?
I don't know if like forgotten is really the word. Like I tend to listen to a lot of like the big names, the heavy hitters, The Who, Zeppelin, Fleetwood Mac, the Eagles. Steely Dan is a good one. Love the harmonies there.
Yeah, yacht rock is making a comeback, so that's right on trend.
Oh yeah, it's a good vibe.
Very cool. So is there anything else you want our audience to know?
So actually, I would love to extend the invitation to any of our listeners out there in the world. If you enjoy reading sci-fi and fantasy, I am starting a new book club that is going to meet at the library one Thursday a month. And that's going to start in September and hopefully go through the whole year. And we'll be reading a different sci-fi or fantasy book every month and then coming together to discuss it. And we will be taking member suggestions. So if you have a book that you'd really like to share with a bunch of other people and get to geek out about it in person, you are able to submit that and it could be chosen for a book club.
Sounds good. And you can find a complete listing of the upcoming dates of the book club on our website at ebpl.org/calendar. Becca, thank you so much for stopping by today and being on our podcast. All of her recommendations, or as many of them that we have in the library, will be listed in the show notes, so you can put them on hold and check them out as soon as possible. Special shout out, as always, to Melissa Hozick, our expert producer, who makes this sound great. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you soon.